Hey, my name is Matt, and thanks for watching my channel. I'm a realtor at Rocksteady Group, also happen to be the broker, just so you know. And today's video is going to be about appraisals. What happens, especially in 2020/2021, what happens when a contract or my property or house you're trying to buy does not appraise? What are the top 3 things that usually happen? What are people doing right now to win bids with appraisals? I'm going to give you a couple little stories, and I'm going to end on a sneaky little question. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching. So one thing right out the gate is I'm not an appraiser. Appraisers complete appraisals, and real estate agents, realtors, things like that, we do things called CMAs, which stands for Comparative Market Analysis. We also do BPOs, which is very similar, if not the same thing, called a broker price opinion. You'll see the BPO stuff more with like foreclosures and when you're working directly for banks or doing refis and helping people out like that. But at the end of the day, appraisers do appraisals. I'm not one. I looked into it years ago. You've got to apprentice under somebody for quite a while. There's a lot of education behind it. At the end of the day, we both kind of do the same steps, but appraisers do appraisals. Just remember that, and I'm not one. All right, so before I get into a lot of other stuff and start rambling on about appraisals and tips and tricks and things like that, let's just stick to the basics. There's 3 things that happen when a house does not appraise. So you're a buyer, you're a seller, it doesn't matter. And you're under contract, and then at the very end of the transaction, which is where they take place, the appraisals that is, it comes back, and just say the house is $300,000 is the contract price, and the appraisal comes in at $280,000. For one, on a side note, don't say the appraisal is low, because that offends the appraiser, because it's not low. In his mind, it's correct. So never say the appraisal came in low. It's just off. We're off. Somebody's off. All right. So we got a difference. The bank is only going to loan you $280,000 because the appraisal came in at $280,000, but yet you have a sales price and a contract of $300,000. So what happens? 3 things, simple as can be. Before 2021 and all that, usually the seller would drop to the appraised value. They would do it kicking and screaming. If I was on the listing side, I would do it kicking and screaming. We're going to try lots of other things and other options and cut closing costs and do a lot of stuff. But at the end of the day, usually the seller would drop to that new price. Number 2, the option is, which used to be insane and now it's pretty common, is the buyer would bring the difference. Why would a buyer pay more for a house than it's worth, according to the appraisal anyway? Number 3 is the both parties, well, technically there's 4 options. Number 3, the buyer and seller can come to some kind of agreement, some kind of neutral ground. We can meet in the middle. The seller might cut some closing cost assistance. The seller was going to be doing all these repairs to appease the buyer. You know, maybe we can go back to the drawing board. Everything is back on the drawing board, despite what some people think or say. When a house does not appraise, you can try to renegotiate all you want. And then, of course, the 4th option, which hopefully we don't do, is both parties can go their separate ways. And one question that someone's probably thinking is, what happens to my earnest money deposit? When a house does not appraise, the buyer gets to keep and retain their earnest money deposit. So that's good to go, all right? The seller still has to sign off on it, but at the end of the day, the contract says when a house does not appraise, the buyer keeps their earnest money deposit, or gets it back, I should say. So 4 things. All right, so we got that out of the way. That's the 4 things that can happen when a house doesn't appraise. Now it's time for me to look at my notes a little bit and do some ramblings and things like that that I enjoyed doing. For one, the appraisers are not out to get us. They hold the keys. When I'm representing a seller and I push the envelope a lot for my sellers, I'm trying to get them top dollar. Yeah, we run into issues where stuff doesn't appraise. I would say I usually have like an 80% chance of working with the appraiser after the fact, after the appraisals come in with rebuttals to get it either changed to what we have the contract for, or at least to meet in the middle somewhere. And that can be done with better comps, maybe some sales that aren't in the MLS that I knew about that I can give them that helps justify our price. They might have missed some odds and ends about the property. One time I had one that was off by like $20,000, and me and Christina actually found it was just a math glitch, literally just like some numbers plugged in the wrong spots. So that was an easy fix. 8 out of 10 ratio of changing their mind. Like I said, think of it this way: it's like going to court. Yes ma'am, no ma'am, super polite, not cocky, not condescending, and go with lots of paperwork. So don't just talk about your opinion, prove your opinion. So if you go to court and you got a lot of paperwork and you're polite, you're probably going to do pretty well with the judge. So think of appraisals like that when you're doing a rebuttal. Do all real estate transactions have appraisals? No. If they're having a mortgage, if there's a mortgage involved, the borrower is borrowing money for the property, yeah, there's usually an appraisal. I've had a few when someone at the bank on the buyer side, I guess, thought the price was very good, and they actually skipped the appraisal. They can do things called like desktop appraisals, but I see them very few and far between. And that's when like the bank does some kind of desktop computerized program, and they're like, "Yeah, you're good. We're good. We don't have to do an appraisal." That you're very lucky when that happens. Cash buyers don't do appraisals. Cash traditional buyers might. Someone's inheriting a lot of money. There's a divorce settlement or something. Buyer, husband and wife are going out and buying houses with cash. Things like that. There might be an appraisal. But like an investor, a flipper, a landlord, somebody holding on to it for long term, somebody that really knows real estate well, doesn't need an appraisal done. They're the guys that keep beating you. So when you're bidding on these properties and these LLCs and flippers keep outbidding you, or not, technically they're not even outbidding you, they're underbidding you and still winning, it's because for one, they're skipping home inspections and they're skipping appraisals. Appraisals take like 2 weeks, roughly. Uh, so when they skip the appraisal process, that means they can close 2 weeks faster than you, just as an average. So a lot of flippers close in 2.5 weeks, and that's why there's no appraisal. So when does an appraisal take place in a real estate transaction? So like, what's your timeline? And I'm not going to touch on too much about the other pieces of this timeline because we're talking about appraisals. But just say, on an average real estate transaction timeline, we got offer, counter offer, acceptance. So now we have a contract. That's the ratification date. Bam. We are now under contract. That is when our stopwatch starts. We have so many days for home inspection. We have so many days for termite and moisture inspection. If it applies, we have so many, well, not necessarily so many days, but then we have a well inspection, a septic inspection. We might have a review period for condo docs, HOA docs, things like that. We pretty much get all these things out of the way on the average before we order the appraisal. Price, the appraisal is like say $400 to $600. They can vary, especially on large property, large houses, things like that. But just say on average about $400 to $600. And once you order it, you pay for it right then and there. And that you're paying for that no matter what. So there's no point in sometimes ordering the appraisal way up here when we know we got to get through home inspection, which is $400 or $500, termite moisture, which is like $100. Well, septic this year's been a nightmare because of all the rain. So we want to make sure you like the house with the easiest steps first. So we're chiseling away at the transaction. And if you're actually satisfied, we order the appraisal, and there's usually a 2-week window, and it comes back. Could you order the appraisal up front? Absolutely. Could you close faster if you order the appraisal up front? Absolutely. Do some people order them a little premature and show their cards? Yes, and here's why. When we're doing a home inspection, buyer side sends over this list of like 20 things. Crazy stuff, easy stuff, I don't know what it is, easy. 20 things. Sometimes before we're done negotiating the home inspection, I get a call as the listing agent, or the seller would get a call from the appraiser saying, "Hey, I received an order for an appraisal and I need to make an appointment to come out and look at it. How you look tomorrow?" Well, we know right then and there that the buyer must like the house enough, and the buyer isn't scared of anything on the home inspection because they just dropped $600 on a appraisal order. So now it's kind of like they showed their cards, and we could just say no to everything. Now the buyer could still walk away, no big deal, but at least they're in the game. They got skin in the game for an additional $500 or $600 because they ordered the appraisal. So if you hear from the appraisal before the repairs are negotiated, that's a really good sign for the seller. Sometimes it's by mistake. Someone, just a lender, an agent, someone just accidentally did it. So it could just be miscommunication. But that's one little trick. So who orders the appraisal? Who pays for the appraisal? Who gets to see the appraisal, and how long does it take on average? The loan officer or someone at the bank orders the appraisal once the buyer or the buyer's agent says to. It's not a pick up the phone and call your buddy Leroy or Bob, "Hey, I need an appraisal." It doesn't work like that. It might have used to have been that way, but especially after like 08, 09, there is no buddy system. It's a portal order. So someone at the bank orders an appraisal usually through a portal. It's like a round robin. It goes out. They pick somebody. No one on the buyer side actually even knows who the appraiser is going out until they make contact with the seller side to make an appointment to see the property. How long does it take? I would think on average it's about 2 weeks. Sometimes the appraisal, the order goes out, and the appraiser is actually already going to be in that neighborhood the next day. So he's like, "Hey, I can come by tomorrow." So he'll come by. They spend 15 to 20 minutes at the property maybe, but they might take the rest of the 2-week window to do the report. Or you might get the report right away. Sometimes they're slammed like they are right now, and they do a 2-week window for ordering the appraisal, and you're going to get it on day 14. They might go out on day 14 and send it to you at midnight. They might send it to you on the 15th day. Sometimes we're waiting on them. It's not their fault. They're slammed. There's not enough appraisers. Like I said, look into it if you're trying to get into real estate. When the appraisal comes back, it trickles down slowly to the different parties. So it comes into like an appraisal. When the appraiser is done, he sends his report into the appraisal department at the bank. Then they notify maybe like an underwriter. Then they notify the loan officer. The loan officer then tells the buyer and maybe the buyer's agent. And then it comes over to the listing side. Buyer side gets to see the report. They get to know the numbers. They get to see the comps. They get to see everything. Seller side, we're just looking for, is it good? Are we good on value? Do we got repairs to deal with? We'll come back to repairs. And that's all we really care about. Are we moving forward or not? Sellers want to know, what did it appraise for? Well, that brings me to another point, that it most likely appraised for the sales price. So don't look too deep into this, don't read into this, but it's almost like there's different levels of appraisals. Because in a real estate transaction, the appraiser is looking to justify the price for the bank. So they're really looking out for the bank. They're kind of looking out for the buyer too. If a person wants to sell a house and they're like, I'm going to order an appraisal to see where I stand, the appraiser doesn't have anything to aim for. So his range is pretty broad. He's got to give you an exact number, really, because that's the idea of an appraisal. But he's having a hard time, or she, there's a pretty broad range, because you can justify this and you can justify that. And they're trying to just be fair, because they don't have anything to run off of. In a real estate transaction, they got a number. So they're really just trying to hit that number. When I first started, I kept thinking, man, I'm really good. Like, I keep nailing these appraised values. I'm always within $2,000. It's always like $2,000. And then I realized that they just kind of are checking to see if the price is good, and then they stop. So the seller, it's always coming in at value. The buyer's like, man, I thought you said I had equity in this. You do. They just stopped when they justified the contract price. Sellers always have the same question. Back to maybe ordering an appraisal before you list a property. That comes down to a little piece called like appraisal versus marketable. You could get an appraisal done and the value might come in, say, at 400. Again, the appraiser has no number. He's really trying to give you a fair number without a contract price. So he comes at, say, 400, and then we list it for 400, and you're like, why isn't the house selling it? The appraisal was 400. It might sell at 375, and that's because there's lots of factors at play. An appraisal is, for one, an opinion of value. It literally says that on the appraisal report, that it's so-and-so's opinion of value. You could hire 5 appraisers and likely get 5 numbers. They might be pretty close, and I would hope they would be. Same thing with an agent, same thing with termite moisture inspectors, same thing with home inspectors. It's all opinion-based, and we're human, and we have opinions and outside forces that kind of influence us, despite trying to stick to a book. So just because it comes in at 400 doesn't mean I can sell it at 400. The appraisal is looking at square footage, bedroom count, bathroom count. Does it have a garage? Does it have 2 garages? Does it have a pool? How many acres? Is it fenced in? Is it on a main road? They're not really getting into the fine details of what you've done to renovate the house, but is it like category A, B, or C renovated, updated, things like that? It doesn't factor in a ton of stuff like, does the neighbor's yard have 10 junk cars sitting in it? Are there goats in the backyard from the nearby farm? When the wind blows from the swamp, does it stink? Things like that. They don't really add value that the appraiser might catch then and there on paper, but it definitely affects your marketability. So just because on paper something is worth something, it might not be able to sell for that. And that's twofold. It could go the other way. An appraisal might be low, or like the true value of a house might be kind of low, but we know we can sell it for more, especially in a market like now. So that's that little tidbit. On that note, I'll give you an example. Property that we're working on right now. Numbers I came up with were a little bit lower than the seller wanted. It's within reason though, so we listed it where they wanted to, and by all means I told them I'm sure we'll get it, I'm just worried about the appraisal. So we listed it a little on the high side. Sure enough, 4 offers come in, $15,000 and $20,000 over what we listed it for, which in my opinion was already high. We actually went with one of the lower offers. Home inspection, termite moisture, all this. A week before closing, bam, the appraisal comes in $30,000 lower than what we were looking for. I didn't say low, just lower than what we're looking for. I had some opinions and feelings on that one, but it didn't seem to make any difference. So we came up with the executive decision of, let's relist the property. Of course, the other side did not like that at all. They wanted to argue that the price was fair. My people's timeline was not the biggest concern. Money was. So I felt we should relist it. Also, the type of loan they had, I think we should relist it. So sure enough, we relisted it. 4 more offers right out the gate, same numbers as last time. So we chose the best loan based on like loan type and what we thought and what they were asking for and extras and things like that. And this time the house appraised. So sure, I'm looking forward to posting that one just because I took a lot of heat from some people on that one. But yeah, that one appraised. So how is it that one was $30,000 off from the other? I don't know, but we played our cards right, and now my people are making $30,000 more for extending 20 days. That's one way to make money. Now I mentioned loan types. There's 3 basic categories without confusing anybody, and that's conventional, FHA, and VA. VA is for veterans and active duty and things of that nature. Conventional and FHA are your 2 other types, and we probably see in Hampton Roads 60% VA loans, and the rest are conventional with a small percentage of FHA. Conventional loans, as far as their appraisal process goes, the house can be in pretty rough shape. You can use a conventional loan to buy a project house to be renovating. It can nearly be caving in, and you can buy a house with a conventional loan. FHA and VA, no. They're pretty tough on the things that are, you see the memes and the jokes among the real estate community about handrails, peel and paint, little bits of broken glass, things like that. It seems petty, but it's a safety thing. So they're trying to make sure their borrower is safe. That can also play a factor in a hot market when you're making offers with a conventional loan versus making an offer with a VA loan. It sounds like you're discriminating, and you honestly are, and it kind of stinks. But a veteran or an active duty person does not have to use a VA loan. They don't have to. They could use a conventional loan. It just requires a little bit of a down payment. So that's why I guess they can get away with just discriminating on loan types. But a conventional loan is always going to be more of your surefire thing to close versus the other 2. Appraisals are not inspections. You could kind of put it in that category, but you definitely need to be clear that there's home inspections, there's chimney inspection, there's HVAC inspection, and then there are appraisals. They might stick their head in the crawl space for a second, they might stick their head in the attic, but they're really spending about 15 minutes walking around the house, taking note of major safety things and updates. And then the majority of the appraisal is done like on a computer later, looking at plugging in values and subtracting values from nearby sales. So when people say that's not going to pass, or that's not going to pass the inspection, you mean the home inspection or the appraisal? Because the home inspection is really just for information that you can use to negotiate with. The appraisal matters, but there's no pass or fail. It's just, do they want some repairs done or not? And it's usually about handrails, broken glass, peel and paint. Is there a stove? Does the heat work? Was the water on at the time of the inspection? Pretty straightforward stuff. Some more information worth, I think, noting is you have the appraised value, you have a sales price, and you have an assessed value. The appraised price is what we've been talking about. So that's just what the appraiser's opinion of value is. A sales price, or also called a contract price, is what the house is under contract for. And number 3 was the assessed value. So I wanted to take a minute to talk about city assessments, and I can make a whole video on that, so I don't want to get too far off. City assessments, think of it as this way. I think this would make the most sense. An appraiser comes to the house. An appraiser has a notepad, he has a video camera, he has a camera, he's taking notes, he's looking at what's been fixed up, what's updated, what's not. Like I said, he might stick his head in the crawl space or the attic. He's walking around all sides, he's walking in every room. Okay, that's an appraisal. A city assessor, have they come and visited your house? Have they visited your neighbor's house? Have they driven by maybe? Or are they using a computer model probably at the city? A city assessment, and this is coming from a city assessor I talked to who had been in the business a long time. A city assessment almost takes a neighborhood or subdivision of 10, 20, 30, 50 houses, whatever. And we're like, okay, over the last 365 days, this guy renovated his house and sold it for a good amount. A flipper got a hold of this house and we sold it for a good amount. This lady had always maintained her house and sold it for this. And just because the market's hot, these 2 people sold for this. So when you look at it as a whole, values came up in that neighborhood. So they might take the percentages of the increase and then apply that tax or increase everyone's city assessment across the board based on those sales. So everyone comes up, their city assessments are now higher, they pay more taxes. That could be the other way around. We could be just a neighborhood full of people that bought at the height of a market, which we're probably going to see in about 5 years. You can have a foreclosure, a short sale, someone unloading a house, another foreclosure, and all of a sudden values start dropping. So the city assessor comes in and sees, oh, this percentage, this percentage, this percentage. I guess we're going to lower our values in that neighborhood. And then you could say, is it better to have a high city assessment or a low? It really doesn't matter. We sell houses 50 grand higher than city assessment, 100,000 higher than city assessment. We've sold houses the exact opposite, 50 and 100,000 lower than city assessment. So it actually plays zero role in a real estate transaction and with the appraisal. It pretty much affects your taxes. So when you're living in our property, you would love for the city assessment to be low. When you're going to sell a property, who wouldn't want it to be higher? Another example is when time is not on your side. And I like to explain things with pretty much real life examples. Imagine you're selling a house, your house, and you're buying a house. So you're stuck in the middle. There might be someone buying your house, you're selling your house, and you're buying a house. So you're in the middle of a domino effect, right? The appraisal comes in lower than the sales price, like 30,000 lower than the sales price. What do? You can definitely have me or someone else or whatever rebuttal the appraisal. That's going to add 7 days, 14 days, and we might not even get anywhere. We might take 2 weeks to do a rebuttal, and then the answer is just no. And the house you're buying is contingent on you selling yours, so therefore you're kind of pinched in the middle, and this guy's not going to cut you any slack because he's ready to close because he's buying something. So do you bring money to the table for the difference? Do you overpay? Do you give your house away? It really stinks, and sometimes you're just in that spot where you got to make a decision, and neither decision's right, neither really decision's wrong. It's just sometimes that's where you land, and it stinks. So all in all, what happens if the deal falls apart at the end of a transaction or you walk away because of an appraisal? You wasted a little money on home inspection, termite moisture inspection, maybe some others, but did you truly waste money? It kept you from buying something that you were going to be overpaying for. Maybe it wasn't the right house for you. So a few $100s here and there is definitely worth walking away from when the right house is still sitting out there for you. For the sellers, another thing to be aware of is in a situation like I had recently where we had 4 very high offers, $15,000 and $20,000 over the list price. Don't get too excited. There's definitely a game to be played right now that the buyer side, the buyer agents, are offering extreme numbers to win the bid, get through the majority of the transaction, and then the buyer agent and the buyers are counting on that house not appraising because they think you're just going to cave in and give it to them. And I can promise you not all listing agents are. We're going to do rebuttals, or we're going to do what I did and put it back on the market. So don't always fall for that trap, and do not count your chickens before they hatch. Usually, as a buyer's agent, if a house doesn't appraise, I can't sleep at night. I feel terrible. It's happened like maybe 3 times in my entire real estate career, and I know if we got another appraisal, it would come back and be different. And so I always wonder if people thought I was one of those agents letting them overpay. As a listing agent, you almost have a proud moment when you've gotten the house under contract and almost to closing, and you're 20, 30 grand higher than the appraised value. Makes you feel like you did something. But honestly, just like in some of the examples I gave you, it's an opinion of value, and it's definitely not a game to be played, because when deals fall apart, it wastes a lot of people's time. People have boxed up, moved, rented houses, rented storage units. So honestly, both agents should be kind of on the same page and aiming for a price that we think is going to get appraised and be happy for, be fair to everybody. Okay, so now you've probably got a pretty good idea of how appraisals work, why we have them, and a little bit about the process. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the comments, or check out my phone number that I'll put here, I guess. Find me on most social media. However you want to reach out, I'd love to answer any questions you have. But I do want to leave you on one little question. It's an observation I've made. I'm sure other agents have done the same. It's not a Hampton Roads problem. It's more of a nationwide observation, you could say. If you put down more money, so that you put down, like, say, 20%, so that you're borrowing 80% of the value, you have a much better loan to value ratio. When you have a better loan to value ratio, you get better rates. You don't have to pay certain PMI insurances. There's lots of little perks to putting big money down. But what happens when the appraised value always comes in kind of at the contract price? You might be buying from somebody you know or a family member. The house is worth 400, but you're getting it for 300 because you know them or it's inherited, whatever. Is the appraisal going to come in at the contract price of like 305, 310, or do you think that appraisal is going to come in at 400? That's the question, and I know the answer. I bet you do too. Thanks for watching.